following contains violence, coarse language, and adult situations not suitable for minors. Viewer discretion is advised.
Brutal!
Hello, everyone. Welcome
Hello.
to another video. I've decided we're going to rip the Frankenstein ladies video intros. Do you know her? I can't remember her name.
No, I don't think so. What does she do?
Well, she's really big for taking, like, hi Moxie, taking like the lips. She's really big for Frankensteining things. So she takes a bunch of things and melts them and puts them all together. Like she's done like all the candles from from the really big candle shop, not Yankee, the other one. Bath and Body Works. I was gonna do Bed Bath and Beyond, but that's not correct. Hi, Whisper.
I still don't follow.
She takes all of them, melts them down, and then puts them into a new container, that that contains all of the smells or the flavors and whatnot, or the colors.
Okay, she melts a bunch of candles together.
Yeah, that's one thing she did. She also did Frankenstein cake. She Frankenstein eyeshadow. She Frankenstein lipstick. So she does a lot of Franken things.
All right.
Moment. Anyway,
If that's her kink, I won't judge. Not openly, at least.
it's not necessarily a kink so much as she does it for, the pure curiosity of it, which is an energy I appreciate. Because, like, my greatest for science moment was when my biology teacher told us she got a leech because she can do that, and just stuck her hand in and let the leech feed off of her just to feel what it felt like. And I'm like, I get you. I understand this energy.
You also have an extreme morbid curiosity.
I mean, yes. I like to find out why things are the way they are. And when my curiosity is sated, I move on.
I mean, leeches are parasites. It's pretty straightforward.
Well, have you ever been bitten by a leech?
No,
Exactly.
I don't want to be bitten by one. I hate getting bitten by mosquitoes. Why would I want to be bitten by something that sticks on even longer?
Hi, Keyframe.
Oh, hi,
You're new
Mark.
here. Welcome to the stream, man. Anyway, we are responding to Overly Sarcastic Productions, who I will admit I'm actually subscribed to for it's mostly for the Journey to the West videos. Because when Red does like story videos, they're really, really good. But generally when she talks about tropes, I think she's a little biased.
Yes.
I think she doesn't really examine the trope and we saw this with her fridging video, where it was she sort of took the obvious definition and ran with it and didn't really dig into the context, the content of the thing she was fridging. She was talking about. So
Yeah,
I think
that was the one about with Thanos in it, right? Like she was confused why Thanos felt sympathy towards Gamora while he killed her.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was
Not good.
Other than that, I don't really watch anything else they've produced. Why does it keep saying my connection is unstable?
Oh, I hear you, Find.
Yeah. Huh. Oh, whoops. That was not meant to happen. Anyway, shall we get started?
Sure. Today we are talking about, or today we're going over her trope video on kaiju.
And
No. Oh, now Clayton says that he doesn't really watch kaiju movies, so this is going to be interesting.
yeah,
But
so
luckily I do.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a back seat for this one and let Caesar do the main responding, unless I find something, a point, egregious.
Yeah. I skimmed through this. I very, very briefly skimmed through this video, so I'm going into this mostly blind.
When is a giant monster not a giant monster? When it's a giant metaphor! Let's do this. So,
Still a giant monster.
I mean, it's still a giant monster by definition. Hi, Horned Rabbit. Like, okay, so just because the giant monster can be viewed as a metaphor does not change that within the context of the universe. It is still a giant monster. I feel like it's belaboring the point just a bit, but with Red, it often is that simple.
kaiju is a Japanese word that literally means strange beast, but it's typically used to refer
gonna
to a
turn off
specific
closed
kind of
caption.
monster in monster.
One moment. Unless, like, someone tells me, like, hey, we're having trouble hearing her. Which, in that case, actually, let me open up my volume mixer and turn up the sound just a little bit, just in case. Ooh, that's a little bit too much. There we go. There. All right.
Monster movies where the monster is giant. Now,
Oh, she sounds loud to y'all? Okay. I turned her up. I will turn her down. There.
Now, what exactly defines a kaiju is a matter of furious academic debate, but most people agree on the classic biologist answer of, you know it when you see it. Now, in general, kaiju
I feel like kaiju is a very, very specific genre of film.
Nobody can ever get Godzilla's onomatopoeia correct. It's not really a screonk. Actually, I don't really know how to put Godzilla's roar into letters. But it's sure as fuck not screonk. Doing all right over there.
Hold on, I'm listening to the roar.
I mean, the roar varies between incarnation.
Interesting. I would not call it a screonk either. So generally, kaiju are big, building-sized or larger, destructive to the environment, very loud. I guess that fits the definition.
Yeah.
Or is it a definition?
Yeah, in movie-wise, yeah, that pretty much describes it.
kaiju are big and destructive and typically enjoy pushing over buildings and screaming a lot. Let's not get too specific. That's how you attract philosophers. Now, kaiju.
I mean, so I would set, just this is for me personally, I would set the terms of this trope as of talking about specifics. Because yes, you're going to attract the philosophers, but here's the thing. If you're going to talk about a specific trope, you definitely want to have, your definitions and what your, like, the specific criteria within a story you're talking about. Now she's just opened the floodgates to arguments of, well, what about this giant creature that's in a cartoon from the 80s that's that doesn't destroy buildings and all that. Is that a kaiju? Ooh, but it's not a metaphor, so it doesn't fit within the context of the video, so I guess it's not a kaiju, but it fits the definition you provided for kaiju.
I'd
So
just
I
say
would.
I'd just say a kaiju is a giant monster that wrecks shit up. So
I mean,
the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man would technically be a kaiju.
but the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man isn't alive.
Yeah, yes, he's a. I mean, he's a spirit of a destroyer god who took the form of the Marshmallow Man.
But the Marshmallow Man itself is not alive.
But the what?
It's an object being possessed.
Well, no, it's not an object. That's the form that the destroyer god took. Because Ray was thinking about Mr. Stay Puft when the other Ghostbusters were trying to not think about anything.
Ah,
Movies are usually about two things: the kaiju itself and how people react to it. A lot of this is because kaiju make extremely convenient analogies for any kind of large-scale threat or fear an audience might be facing. Kaiju are typically huge, powerful, and impossible to control, persuade, or stop with conventional weapons. And notably, they're not really comparable to anything else, like a horror monster but bigger and less personal, like a natural disaster but with a lot more agency. How would people handle this is an interesting question because kaiju don't have easy real-world parallels. Kaiju ask the question, what would you do in the face of something so vast and powerful that you couldn't overpower it? And if a society has some big nebulous fear that they can't really deal with, as most societies do, you can take out the nebulous part and turn that fear into a monster, and then ask the question again. It turns speculative fiction into social commentary. Now, what exactly
It can't. It
I would
can.
disagree.
It depends on the movie. Sometimes it's just a big, dumb, fun monster movie.
Yeah, but also wasn't the first Godzilla origin like it was exposed to radiation from the nukes on the from like a nuclear testing site?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily it's
I mean,
so the original metaphor for Godzilla would be like a monster humanity created.
yeah, in the original movie, Godzilla is like a metaphor for the atomic bomb, but emphasis on the first movie because Godzilla, there's so many Godzilla movies, and sometimes Godzilla has other symbolisms, but most of the time he's just a big monster.
Yeah. But I don't see how that translates to this is a societal fear. No, this was sort like if we're really gonna dig into that, then how do you explain? Like you could argue that for something like Godzilla, who has sort of a defined origin, or at least a commonly known one. But what would you say for something like, oh, I don't know, Mothra or Ghidorah? I think that's his name.
Ghidorah, yeah,
Ghidorah, yes.
Ghidorah is
Like,
most incarnations. He's a giant dragon from outer space. And then Mothra is usually some kind of guardian spirit.
okay, see, yeah, so you see how the metaphors are sort of getting like weird, right? Like if we're going to look at these creatures as metaphors for societal fears, there's destruction raining from space is not necessarily something that every society he has, fear of.
Yeah.
But then and then as like you said with Mothra, okay, so what societal fear or what societal pressure is causing the invention of a guardian spirit shaped like a moth?
Yeah.
This may be a cultural thing in Japan, who knows? But
Yeah, it's been a really long time since I've seen the original Mothra movies, so I don't remember it very well. But usually, in most incarnations, Mothra is accompanied by these two twin fairy sisters, and I think in the original movie, those twin fairies were kidnapped, and so Mothra was ripping through Tokyo to get them back.
ah,
Like I said, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, so don't quote me on that.
we're less than a minute in. We're just over a minute in, actually. Correction.
that big nebulous sphere is can vary a lot. Godzilla, the archetypical kaiju, originated as the terror of the bomb, the post-World War II fear of the consequences of nuclear weaponry. More recent kaiju movies like Pacific Rim and even some of the Godzilla remakes cast the kaiju as more analogous to climate change, the current big nebulous threat. And with King
Eh.
I'm trying to remember Pacific Rim. I've seen the original movie, but I've never seen the sequel. But I've seen the original movie and the Netflix animated series, but I haven't seen the second movie. I don't recall there being any climate change allegories.
I guess with the scene she just showed, the kaiju blood or whatever, or something, or rather some residue is.
I think that's I think that's just simply world building, because
Yeah.
within the first movie, yeah, people collect body parts of the kaiju. They sell them on the black market.
And then it would make sense that an entire industry or multiple industries would formulate around these giant creatures that constantly attack places. Like, it makes sense. So that would just be world building. But from what I remember of the trailers and clips I've seen of Pacific Rim, it seems more like it's a story of humanity's persistence against, an overwhelming threat,
Yeah, pretty much.
which seems to be more the theme of the movie rather than we need to defend the environment.
Yeah, and I don't remember there being any environmental messages in the new Godzilla movies.
And then, of course, there's the 1990s Godzilla movie, which is utterly ridiculous in every way. But I have, vague memories of reviews of that movie, and I think I've watched it at one point. And like, I don't think the theme in that movie was ever like, oh, this is happening because of the environment. No, it was more of, yeah, this creature exists. It's gonna do a thing. It's gonna destroy a lot of people. We should probably find a way to like either direct it or stop it.
Kong, who was a kaiju before kaiju were cool, he's
I would disagree with that,
I mean,
but
I
I'm
think
not a kaiju fan.
King Kong, I'd say, is what made kaiju cool. I mean, Godzilla himself was actually based on King Kong.
Hmm.
I'd say the first kaiju movie would probably be the original Lost World, the one that came out in the 1920s. It's an
Isn't
old
this
sci-
footage from that movie?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. You can watch it for free.
Cool.
But the only thing you would call it, sorry, I guess the only part you'd call a kaiju scene is at the very end. They bring in a Apatosaurus with them back to London, and then it breaks free and starts destroying buildings before escaping.
a giant monstrous ape from a far-off land that kidnaps a terrified white lady. And one extremely popular interpretation is that he's analogous for the racism and the xenophobia that
No,
was
he
so
fucking
popular
isn't.
Okay, yeah, but that like, how did you?
in 1930s America.
Okay, how did you come to that conclusion?
Yes, if you think that if you're seeing this giant ape as a black man, that says more about you than it does the movie.
And I won't disagree with her completely on this. This is absolutely something you could pull up. That would absolutely be something people could take away from that in the 30s and 40s. But I don't think that was the intent. I think it was, the intent was to show off. Like, look what we can achieve through film. This is like, isn't this amazing? There's a giant gorilla on your screen, and he's very clearly holding a woman, a normal-sized woman that we've established in this movie. So that's it's amazing. It's sort of the War of the Worlds thing, which, when you dig into it, is not actually that cool. The So you know how that the original World of Worlds broadcast caused like a major panic?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so that's actually not true. So like what happened was this specific town had lost power, or like had a power outage for some reason, and then they came back and had to listen to and were listening to the broadcast of War of the Worlds, and it caused the town to panic. It was like one town in like rural America, which was much more prevalent back then, but it was like one town that it happened to. Nobody else had that happen to them because the town had lost power for prior to the broadcast. So they thought it was real. It's sort of lame when you think of it like that.
Hmm.
Because it's instead of, oh, humanity's so dumb, we need, well, we need, you know people to watch and regulation and all that, and then you get the context and you're like, oh yeah, they were made the decision made decisions based off faulty information that was no fault of their own, through no fault of their own. Huh.
Kaiju let us cast nebulous, invisible fears as skyscraper-sized giant monsters, which is useful because it's easier to think about a giant monster than a disembodied fear. In fact, it's a grand old sci-fi tradition to make your monster an allegory for a current threat, like in Heinlein's The Puppet Masters, where he very specifically reminds the audience on multiple occasions that these mind-controlling alien parasites are just like those gosh darn communists.
I mean,
I mean,
where's the lie though?
yeah, where is the lie? But further, you could argue that if we're going to take that interpretation, we could also say that it's analogous to any force trying to control your thoughts and emotions. The fact that the commies were the enemy of the day just, happens to fit. But if we're being realistic, the theme of the fear that you yourself are not in control of your own thoughts, feelings, and actions is a genuine and, universal one. Which is why it's a harder sell for me that kaiju in modern films are global warming monsters, rather than, just big monsters.
Yeah, I'd say the overarching theme of the new Godzilla movies is that it's just the idea that that nature is the one that's in control of the world, not humanity. It's like in like the Sarazawa in the first in the 2014 movie puts it, pretty much sums up the entire theme. The arrogance of man is thinking that nature is in his control and not the other way around, and that theme is prevalent throughout the other movies.
Anyway, kaiju are often used to embody the prevailing social fear of the day, be it xenophobia, McCarthyism, or various apocalyptic threats. This also means that
Except McCarthy was right.
kaiju narratives are heavily dependent on the social context they're created in, and they often change as the society changes. So let's start by diving into the archetypical kaiju, Godzilla. Now,
I mean, I guess I'm not as familiar with this type of stuff as you are. So has Godzilla I know his look has changed, but has the sort of projection from the Japanese changed at all?
I'd say it has. Like the Japanese perception of Godzilla. Yeah, I think most people just nowadays they just see him as a monster. He's an icon in their pop culture. I mean, most Japanese people nowadays were not alive when the atomic bombs happened.
True. Most people today weren't alive when the atomic bombs happened. Rabbit, are you saying we're reaching or she's
I think
others
he's
are,
talking about her.
I mean, it's not incorrect, but I would argue that most of the sort of huge things that come from Japanese culture are, offshoots of Godzilla. Like the whole Power Rangers and not Mega Man, the other one.
Ultraman.
Yes, that one. Where like it's just let's have a hero grow large to fight off a large threat. So I think it's Godzilla emerged into the cultural zeitgeist at a very, very key time, and then everybody else followed that. And now we have, giant robots and giant people.
Now, Godzilla first appeared in 1954 in the Japanese movie Gojira. Now, before I get into the story of the movie, I need to provide a little bit of real-world context surrounding the production of this movie. First of all, the obvious, World War II. Godzilla was released 9 years after the war ended, 9 years after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the first and currently last use of nuclear weapons in warfare. The director of the film, Ishiro Honda, was a World War II veteran who passed through Hiroshima on his way home and had been horrified at the devastation. Now, the US occupied Japan until 1952, and during that time, they censored Japanese media. Notably, nobody was allowed to actually talk about the atomic bomb, which meant that for 7 years, all that nationwide nuclear fear couldn't be directly addressed.
I mean, okay.
I got nothing to add to that.
But that was a. She does talk fast, Whisper. Exactly. So she's correct about, the theme of the original Godzilla movie, which was, the nuclear, the sort of threat of the destruction that the nuclear bombs imparted, which I'm not disagreeing, but it's hard to feel sympathy for the Japanese when you find out what they did in World War II.
Yeah, I mean, the atomic bombs was horrible, but at the same time, man, the Japanese government pretty much brought it upon themselves.
Oh, dude, like I'm not even talking about the Japanese government. I mean, like the Japanese soldiers, like
Oh yeah, like in Nanking, yeah.
they like the Japanese are kind of messed up when you read about their history in war. Like it's
Yeah, man, like to this day, a lot of East Asian countries still hate the
nobody really
Japanese.
talks about it. Hello?
Hey,
Okay.
I hear you, man.
Okay, good. Because I still have that unstable thing.
You sound
I'm
fine on my end.
I'm hoping the stream is okay. It's more it's a somewhat larger concern. But yeah, she's reaching super hard for this theme when she could discuss, like, she's reaching super hard for a unifying theme throughout instead of saying, well, what about what is it about, instead of looking at Godzilla and saying, well, contextually well, within the context of a film, the film sort of outright states it, nature will, like, we can provide, and it could destroy us with it. But even if American media censored the, you know, censored the mention of the nuclear bombs for Japan, it wasn't like it was an unfamiliar fear for a large portion of the world at that time. Like, the Cold War is just getting started. At this point, like, the Cold War's been on for nearly a decade by now. By the time that the first Godzilla movie comes out, like, the idea of nuclear war was not unfamiliar to the rest of the world. Well, so it's weird that that not discussing it would be the catalyst for this, rather than it simply showing the end result, than the theme being, well, the end result of, or the consequences of humanity sort of opening this Pandora's box is even further, even more destruction.
After the US occupation ended, they decided to keep tickling the proverbial dragon's tail by restarting the Bikini Atoll nuclear tests, beginning with the Castle Bravo test, where the US detonated a high-yield thermonuclear bomb approximately 1,000 times more powerful than either of the atom bombs dropped on Japan 9 years earlier. Now, while Bikini Atoll is a couple thousand miles away from Japan, it is kind of their oceanic backyard, and the currents in that region do lead back to Japan. Now, the problem was the Castle Bravo test detonated an extremely dirty bomb. It produced a ton of fallout, much more than the report officially stated, and probably more than anyone expected. Sometimes nuclear physics is a little more art than science. Now, some of this fallout contaminated a nearby Japanese fishing boat, inflicting the 23 crew members with acute radiation sickness, killing one of them and sparking an international incident. The US denied that the fallout could have affected the boat, Japan said the fallout had to have come from somewhere, tensions rose, and a Polish scientist crunched the numbers and confirmed the detonation had produced much more radioactivity than the US admitted. The media got a hold of it, the US quickly paid reparations to Japan, and nuclear paranoia spiked. It wasn't really a good look for the US. People were starting to realize that nukes were seriously bad news for literally everybody, and the US was kind of just dropping them willy-nilly in the ocean without making sure nobody was going to get hurt first. By the way, if you ever really want to piss yourself off, look up what happened to the people who lived on Bikini Atoll. So this
I mean, if I really want to piss myself off too, I could just look up the Japanese war crimes. Like pretending the US is the only bad guy in history is to put blinders on and pretend everybody else did nothing wrong.
Yeah, especially considering the other superpowers at the time.
Oh yeah.
The Soviet Union and communist China, man. Like, yeah, I don't condone the US government abusing their power, but fuck, dude, considering who they're up against, yeah, I see them as the lesser evil.
Should we talk about the potential, Russian nuclear tests that they had to run to make sure their bombs functioned? We're not going to talk about that and what they did to those. I guess most of their country is empty, so, But who knows? They may have just done it to their regular citizens.
This was the immediate social context surrounding the creation of Godzilla. 2 nukes dropped 9 years prior, not allowed to talk about it for 7 of those years, and only 8 months earlier, 23 of your citizens were poisoned by a nuclear superweapon, accidentally. And the US is still testing those bombs in that area. Everyone is tense, everyone's way too familiar with the effects of nuclear weaponry, everyone
Highlight Trooper, welcome to the stream.
is really hoping it doesn't happen again, but also knows it's completely out of their hands. And then they release Godzilla. Now, just for a moment, let's all pretend we've never heard of Godzilla. Godzilla? What's that? Some kind of soda, maybe? Well, the movie starts off strong with a Japanese fishing boat full of dudes having a grand old time until the ship is destroyed and the crew is killed by some unseen force and a blinding flash of light. Uh-oh. That sounds a lot like that thing that just happened earlier that year, but worse. Huh. So they send a boat to investigate, and the boat is destroyed. They send a third boat, and the boat is destroyed. An island is devastated in the night, and 17 houses are crushed. It could have been an earthquake, it could have been a typhoon, but neither of those would explain the radiation, and they certainly wouldn't explain the footprints. So yeah, Godzilla 1954 is a horror movie, unlike literally any of its sequels. Godzilla is kept hidden for much of the movie, and it makes sense this would be played for horror because he is the personified terror of the bomb. I want to take a hot second to jump forward.
It's also the first movie. It's very normal for monster movies to do this. You don't see much of the monster until like near the midpoint.
Yeah.
But then with the sequels, you've already seen the monster, so sure, we'll throw them in at the very beginning. You see this in like more standard horror films.
Like Pacific Rim does this. Like you don't see a kaiju in that movie till after the opening. Like aren't the opening scenes, you see the Jaegers and they're battling this.
Oh, yeah. In the opening, you see the first kaiju, and then there's just a montage just setting up the world, and then we see the characters. We see the protagonist's backstory where he lost his brother fighting a kaiju, and then we flash forward to the present day. Then there's a little while till we see the next kaiju.
But I think Pacific Rim is a bad example because every kaiju they fight in that movie looks different. Like all the kaijus are relatively uniquely designed. So it's like, oh, well, Cool. So it's just sort of the anticipation of waiting for the new monster to be revealed.
Time and talk about Chernobyl, both the nuclear disaster and the miniseries recounting it. I've seen some people describe the first episode as something like Lovecraftian horror, and they're totally right. The exposed reactor and the radiation it's releasing is like some otherworldly dark god. It reaches through walls, right through your skin. Looking at it will kill you flat out. Being in the same building as it will make you wish you were dead. Gets into the water, the air. You could even say it's a mysterious color, unlike any seen on Earth. It's horrifying to watch if you know what's happening. It's horrifying to watch if you don't. You don't get forces like that on terrestrial planets. You don't get them outside of stars. In a very
Okay. I would point out that if we're going to do this, we could just we could have the same argument about, mine explosions. Or just mining in general. This is a completely unnecessary segue.
real sense, the powers unleashed by a nuclear weapon or a nuclear accident are otherworldly, eldritch, incomprehensible, and extremely deadly. And that is
So is poison gas released in a mine shaft? If we're going to be Lovecraft, it's Lovecraftian horror. Okay, well, the people that bust a pocket of poison gas in a mine shaft experience the same thing.
So how is it Lovecraftian?
Exactly.
I'm not overly familiar with all of Lovecraft's work.
Well, Lovecraft does a lot of Lovecraft in his work does a lot of mystery building. Like the sort of active reasoning for a lot of things doesn't take form. Like in The Color from Outer Space, he's the color the creature or thing lands in this town on this farm, leeches the color and life from everything around this well and leaves. Nobody really knows why or how it happens. In like the Call of Cthulhu, the town of Innsmouth plays host to a cult that is slowly turning people into fish. Or is like a cult of the town of Innsmouth is a cult of fish people. And they eat people. So it really depends on like where you're coming from. But her point being like it's sort of this inevitable, unseen force that you can't really do anything about. Sort of that, like, oh, if you faced Cthulhu, you would go mad. Kind of thing. Like looking into fate, like the whole impetus behind Lovecraftian horror is that there are these extra universal forces that exist, create monstrous create sort of monstrous mutations and abominations of people and animals and all this stuff, and they do it for reasons that are well beyond human comprehension. And some of them, like like Azathoth, are so insane that their motivations, they don't really have any. And there's a bunch of like elder gods within the Cthulhu mythos, but the thing with a lot of Lovecraftian horror is no, you don't understand the motivations of the monster behind it. You understand that it is sentient, it has will. Well, it just, you as human don't understand why it's doing this. Like the motivation for doing it or the reason why it's happening is completely beyond you. Which I would say does not fit anywhere near the True Noble miniseries, because it treats, because while horrific, everyone understood what was going on. The reactor had burst and people were dying. Played as a tragedy or a horror flick, maybe, but that's only probably to emphasize the tragedy. I don't know that it applies to a kaiju film where the monster's motivations don't matter. It's simply doing what a monster would do. Destroy things. Whatever, like Godzilla doesn't have, moral agency, so to speak.
It depends on the movie.
It does depend on the movie, but I'm within the context of the first movie, Godzilla doesn't have moral agency. It's just it's just doing what what a lizard in nature would probably do.
Yeah, I mean,
Look for food, shelter, mates.
yeah, I've heard people say that Godzilla is trying to exact revenge on humanity for I guess radiating him, but I don't think I've ever seen like a solid source to confirm that.
How they play Godzilla. Nobody can even figure out what Godzilla is for a while because he keeps killing everything that gets close. He can't be stopped by buildings or walls, weaponry has no effect on him, and anything he can't smash to pieces, he melts with the pure radiation he breathes. When he levels Tokyo, the damage he does is almost identical to what happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it's slower, so you can see it all in vivid detail. Buildings crushed and burned, bystanders killed, and nothing they throw at him even slows him down. Now, if there's one advantage Godzilla has over other allegorical narrative devices, it's that the characters in his movie are completely willing to acknowledge and talk about the thing he's an allegory for. Feels like every 5 minutes one of the characters goes, "Hey, remember the bomb? Sucked, right?" Characters outright draw the analogy between Godzilla and the bomb, and in the official lore of the movie, Godzilla is only a problem because of the bombs. Specifically, the nearby nuclear testing, like the Castle Bravo incident.
Yep, this is all true.
Yeah. So she's right in that respect of the first movie. Godzilla is an analog for that, for the destruction and the end results of the nuclear bomb. I would find it odd though if this stayed a consistent theme.
It does not. I mean, Godzilla in most movies, Godzilla is still is got nuclear energy within him. But for in most movies, he's just a monster.
In the movie explain that Godzilla's natural habitat under the ocean must have been destroyed by the H-bomb testing because the radioactive signature he's leaving behind is unique to H-bombs. Godzilla is only radioactive in the first place because of the bombs. So he's in this interesting place where in-universe he's a victim of reckless nuclear testing and attacks, but from a meta-narrative perspective, he's an embodiment of those attacks. Both.
No.
I'd say yes.
I mean, no, he's not. He is both an allegory. He is both the destruction. He is the incidental destruction more than anything else. Like, I would argue that from a meta perspective, Godzilla does represent the nuclear bomb, but more so is representative of the unintended consequences of the bomb.
An allegory and a victim. And if you look at the way the narrative is framed, Godzilla is not representative of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as is often phrased. He's representative of the nearby nuclear tests and their implications. He's the threat that Hiroshima and Nagasaki could happen again. This was a deeply political movie. So Godzilla is basically nuclear irresponsibility on two legs, a way to embody an invisible, ephemeral terror that was unfortunately all too real. And there's actually another facet of the movie, because the only way they can find to kill Godzilla is to unleash an even worse weapon they call an oxygen destroyer. The scientist who creates it is so hell-bent on making sure it's never used in a global arms race that he burns all his notes and kills himself when they use it on Godzilla. The message is incredibly overt. These weapons are awful, they do damage in ways we can't possibly predict, it might already be too late, but we have to stop while we still can. Now this is moody. It's dark, it's tragic, it's not very hopeful. It even ends with one of the characters stating that if nuclear tests continue, there could very easily be another Godzilla. So
Subtle.
nobody's having a good time.
Yeah.
Very subtle.
Yeah, in retrospect, that line is actually extremely cringy.
So it's not all that surprising that no sequel follows this format, because this
Never
is
be too on the
heavy
nose with your themes.
stuff. And sometimes you want a deeply tragic, terrifying movie to help you process your communal trauma and warn the rest of the world against hubristic self-destruction. And sometimes you just want to watch a giant nuclear dinosaur beat up a dragon from space. So after this trend-setting kaiju movie broke onto the scene, it was followed by a parade of sequels that were almost unilaterally structured as Godzilla becomes the lesser of two evils. Pit Godzilla against another giant monster, and we're probably going to root for Godzilla just on the grounds of familiarity. Heck,
Hi, Infert.
It depends on the movie once again. In the early, I guess, so in some movies, Godzilla actually is still the villain. Usually and sometimes it's actually another monster that has to defeat him. And then sometimes it's the other way around. It's purely case by case.
True. Okay. Here's the thing, Horn Rabbit. So she is correct in that this movie is political. It has from from the scenes and the dialogue we were able to see from her, which, it may absolutely be taken out of context. But within the context of within the cultural zeitgeist of the day, it does make sense that it's a very political movie. And she can attach that and she can attach that theme to that movie because it's a very explicit theme. What I'm having trouble with right now is seeing where this theme connects to other kaiju movies. Because she's right in that the first Godzilla movie very clearly is an anti-nuclear war movie, and it's not the first of its kind. It's hardly even a notable of its kind.
Yeah, it looks like the rest of the video is just going to be about Godzilla.
Yeah.
Yeah, not very well put together.
So the overarching theme. So if we're going to connect all kaiju with this theme of kaiju represent society's fears embodied, well, you can make that argument for the first movie, but what are you talking about with the others? The many, many, many others that involve giants, like giant spiders, a three-headed dragon, and like King Kong.
Before I forget, there actually is one Godzilla movie where Godzilla is straight up an embodiment of Japanese war guilt. So in this movie, it's like a very hard reboot. The only movie that happened was the original one before it, and so the spirits of everybody who were killed by the Japanese military during World War II, I guess they all they manifested and became turned into a brand new Godzilla. And this Godzilla is pure evil and actually does deliberately go around killing people in Japan.
Okay, so the theme there would be anti-war.
Yes. Well, I guess more like Japan actually Japan acknowledging their war guilt.
Yeah.
And then the monsters, and there's three monsters that fight Godzilla. They're the good guys, but they're not really trying to protect the people of Japan. They're just protecting nature itself.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. I see what you were trying to say earlier, Horned Rabbit. Yeah. No, I agree with you. She's trying to connect because first movie he was deeply political. Now all is deeply political, but that's definitely not the case. Is like Caesar just pointed out. One of them's about the war guilt. Like, oh, we did some terrible shit. That's gonna come back to haunt us and destroy our society.
His third movie ever was Godzilla vs. King Kong, which is pure spectacle. On the subject of King Kong,
That's what most kaiju movies are.
Yeah.
Especially nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, I know I haven't seen it, but
So
what
okay,
major political theme would you derive from the new King Kong versus Godzilla?
the newest one, I guess
Yeah.
the villain is the villain is trying to. Okay, so the previous movies have established that there's Godzilla is part of this order of giant monsters called Titans. Essentially, the Titans are the true rulers of Earth. And back in ancient times, people actually worshiped them like gods. And by the by the third movie, people are, I guess, a lot more aware of the Titans' existence. And so the villain of that movie is building a giant robot Godzilla to basically kill all the Titans, so humanity can become the rulers of Earth again.
So dude's upset because he has small dick energy.
You can put it that way, sure.
There's think pieces about various ways it can be interpreted, but I don't think it's exactly controversial to suggest that a movie made in the 30s about a giant savage ape who is captured by white men, transported across the ocean in chains, and then abducts a white
Not
woman
everybody in
could
the
possibly have
1930s was
some
racist.
racial
Fucking hell.
True. However, like, again,
That's not what the creator has never said that. This is purely speculation. There's no, as far as I can tell, there is absolutely no credible source that says this.
agreed. And honestly,
Actually,
the best you could argue in this situation would be that that it's like that because of the prevailing attitudes of the day.
oh, you should. Yeah, we need to talk to Dunn about this because I know on his show he's covered a book that actually does bring up this allegory. Apparently, the book he covered is where this whole allegory speculation originally comes from.
Interesting.
Yeah, I forgot what the book is called, so you'd have to ask him.
Most interesting. But
So
yeah,
yeah, the book itself is pure crackpot crap.
but again, like it may like it, I can see where the allegory comes from. I can see why they would draw that conclusion. But the problem is that if they really wanted to, they didn't need a giant savage ape to do it.
Yeah, probably
Like
good.
straight up. Like
Yeah.
if they wanted to be racist, and I mean, let's look at the side by side here. If they wanted to be racist, they wouldn't need the ape. The ape is there for the ape, not to be racist, not to be
Yeah.
a racist allegory.
Yeah, it also kind of leaves out the fact that the movie also has dinosaurs in it. So, Kong fights a bunch of dinosaurs to protect Anne. So are the dinosaurs allegories for something?
Who knows?
coding involved. And for the sake of my comment section, please do not try to defend the political sensitivity of a movie made in 1933.
Oh, I will. I just did.
Hello. Hi, Red. Hi. We're
Yes.
not in your comment section,
Yes,
but we are defending the movie.
yes, not everybody in the 1930s was evil. Hell, as far as I can tell, most cases of racism was more just based on people's personal ignorance, and then that ignorance influences other people's ignorance.
But even further, like, why are we pointing it out as if it's some kind of moral failing on the movie's part that it's racist?
Also, why are you bringing up that this is some kind of absolute when even earlier you said that this was a fan speculation? A popular speculation, and I say popular in quotes.
Yeah, I agree. Like, so her sort of so why I don't understand this. And I don't think I read. So why is it that a movie made within the context of its own so and we saw this with 19 like literally 2 minutes ago we were discussing how she was correct about the context and thematic, like, the political themes contained within the original Godzilla. And we're not looking at that as a moral failing because, it's a positive theme. But if we're going to argue that a political theme within King Kong, the original King Kong, or Lost World, I guess, is where he originally comes from, is a moral failing because we can read racism into it, but Godzilla 1954 gets all this context as to why it is the way it is versus King Kong, which is just the way it is because racism. I don't see how that, tracks.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like,
as far as I can tell, the King Kong, it's just simply a ripoff of the Lost World. Explorers learn about this land lost to time. They go there. They come across a bunch of ancient monsters. They capture one and bring it back to civilization. It breaks loose and destroys everything.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
instead of a dinosaur, it's a giant ape.
But even more than that, she's literally saying, like, don't defend the original King Kong to me because it's obviously racist. But I have to be like, okay, you gave all this political context and why the Japanese
Yeah,
would want
Yeah,
to.
so we're gonna act like the Japanese were morally superior in the 1950s.
But we understand why. But my point is that we understand why the 1954 Godzilla movie is the way it is because of the context surrounding it. Why doesn't the original King Kong get the same benefit of the doubt? Like, I don't, like, because it's racism instead of, being about nuclear war and fallout. But here's the thing: if racism is sort of the prevailing idea of the day, or at least, common within cultural attitude of the day, that's not a moral failing on the film's part. Nor is it a moral failing on the people's part because they don't really, have, because, they're dead and they grew up in the society they grew up in. It's like saying to a uncontacted tribe, you're uncivilized because you don't have a car, but they've only grown up, running everywhere.
And we just accept that the giant ape is probably racist.
No,
No,
I cannot.
because there's no credible source that says it.
There's also no evidence for it. And realistically, if they had wanted to make the giant ape a giant black man, they would have and could have.
Oh yeah, man.
Anybody saying anything.
Oh yeah, I don't know if you ever seen. I don't know if you ever seen there was a version of the Wizard of Oz that also came out in the 1920s. This was before the Judy Garland movie. This was a silent movie and a slapstick comedy. So, long story short, one of the main characters is a black man, and the very first time we see him, he's sitting out in the middle of the field just munching on a watermelon. It's like, if we're going to talk about racism at the time, then yeah, the Hollywood could be a lot more blatant if they wanted to.
Yeah, literally. Like, if they wanted to make the King Kong allegory, racism and xenophobia, why not have I don't know, an army of black people invading the country or being, well, why not have this uncontacted tribe take over a boat, sail back, and kill a bunch of people?
Yeah, pretty much. You could
Literally could have done it, and no one would have said shit.
I was gonna say, be something kind of like Tarzan. You bring one of these tribal guys back to civilization, and then he just wreaks havoc. because he doesn't know better. So yeah, Red looking way too deep into it.
Okay,
Oh
moving
wait.
on. Now
I
the
want
thing
to read that again. Rewind it.
is probably racist.
Comment. Subtextual analysis is SJW propaganda.
I mean, yes.
I mean, what you said wasn't even true. That's something an SJW made up. So yeah.
Okay, moving on. Now, the thing is, King Kong didn't shake his allegorical implications as easily as Godzilla did. While Godzilla got sequels and character development aplenty, most King Kong movies were remakes. A handful were sequels or alternate versions, but nothing really stuck. And as long as the movies were following the original format, they were stuck with either the allegorical baggage of large ape man becomes obsessed with and kidnaps white woman, or the alternative version where the white lady is into it, so it's consensual. I don't know anyone who was comfortable with that.
She's not into it in that movie. She
Yeah,
sees him more like she sees him as a misunderstood creature.
like she cares for him and does not want to see him hurt.
Yeah, she
Because
doesn't.
she understands, like, oh, this thing is, intelligent, and we should treat it as such, and not, fucking kill it because it's big and because it's big and frightening.
That angle, but they did try it a few times. Godzilla, meanwhile, underwent a gradual heel-face turn. Over the course of nearly a dozen sequels, he slowly drifted from lesser of two evils to cranky protector of the Earth. His most significant character development came in Destroy All Monsters,
Oh god.
where he teams up with every other kaiju in the world to fight noted three-headed space dragon King Ghidorah, after which point every appearance is functionally fully benevolent. He's still cranky, and he gives humans the stink eye whenever they pollute and stuff, but this Godzilla is basically a giant, grumpy Captain Planet. He's a protector of the Earth. He only squishes things accidentally. And this was a very popular direction to take kaiju. In the current remakes of both Godzilla and King Kong, the protagonist kaiju are functionally Gaia's vengeance, protectors of nature, disturbed from their peace or hibernation exclusively by human intervention and the occasional evil space dragon. And with King Kong, it's kind of flipped his allegorical implications from good old 30s racism to a kind of anti-colonialist.
He's not an allegory for 30s racism. Stop repeating that until you have an actual credible source. Sorry, go on.
Where he's this noble and wondrous being in his home habitat and shouldn't be taken away or harmed. Take only pictures. Leave only footprints. Visit scenic Skull Island today. Now, this character drift is convenient.
Although, I'll be honest, I would love to see Skull Island. It's a place of giant animals.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much you can do with the King Kong formula. But yeah. Yeah, the Skull Island was an okay movie.
Because unlike the terror of the bomb allegory, or, good old 30s racism, this characterization gives the kaiju a moral compass and lets your protagonists be on their side, instead of hopeless and powerless in the face of unfeeling nuclear Armageddon. Or not white people. With this kind of kaiju narrative, it's less existential horror and more Captain Planet. More good people versus bad people conflicts, only the good people have the power of Godzilla and anime on their side. Gee, I wonder why anyone would want to write something like that. Wish fulfillment? Never heard of it. So kaiju.
What makes you think it's wish fulfillment? I mean, yeah, in the West, that usually is a popular depiction of Godzilla, is that he's sort of a superhero. Every time we have, or most of the time we have Western Godzilla media, that's how he is. Like in the old Hanna-Barbera cartoon, yeah, he's straight up a hero. And then they had the animated series that was based on the '98 movie. That Godzilla also became sort of a hero. I mean, and
exactly.
I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you? You want your audience to cheer this guy on when he fights bigger, badder monsters.
And even if even if it was with wish fulfillment, so what? Are you upset that it's wish fulfillment because you can't, crowbar your political theming into it? Is that what's going on here? I feel like that's what's going on here.
Movies ask the question, what would humanity do in the face of something terrifyingly powerful, unthinkably enormous, and functionally unstoppable? Godzilla answered it with die a lot and then risk a global arms race to destroy it once and for all. The post-1954 sequels answered it with cheer from the sidelines while it beats up something worse. And the post-2014 remakes doubled down into leave
That's
the
once
kaiju.
again, that's purely case by case.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll give a very brief retrospective of the Japanese Godzilla movies. Okay, so I guess the original continuity. So here in the West, we like to divide the Godzilla continuities based on, I guess, which the era in Japan. And so in Japan, each era is based on who the emperor is. So the original continuity is called the Showa era. This has the original movie, and along with every following movie up until the 70s. And so in that continuity, the original Godzilla died at the end of the movie, but then just another member of his species just conveniently exists, and he's now Godzilla for the rest of the continuity. So that got the second Godzilla. He starts off as a villain like the original, but then by the time he becomes starts out sort of, I guess what would you call it, sort of, I guess, neutral evil, but then he slowly becomes more chaotic neutral. Then he has a son, and then he pretty much becomes a superhero at that point. And then let's see, after that, we starting with the 80s, this was called the Heisei era. None of the other movies happened except for the original. So once again, the original Godzilla died. This is the new Godzilla. He once again starts off for about half the movies. He's the villain, and another monster is usually the one that has to stop him. But then near the end of the Heisei era, Godzilla started becoming more of an anti-hero. And then he died. And then his son from that continuity becomes the next Godzilla. Let's see. Then after that, there was the 1998 movie. And I guess the people at Japan hated it so much, they brought Godzilla back. And this is called the Millennium series. The continuity is very loose in this one. So most of the movies are just reboots that ignore the last ones. So Godzilla is pretty much all over the place in this continuity or in this series. And then after that now we have the Legendary series, which is made here in the States. And then all the Japanese Godzilla movies are called I think the fans call this the Reiwa era. And once again, there's not a solid continuity. It just encompasses all the Japanese Godzilla movies at the time. So the first one for the Reiwa era was Shin Godzilla. This one, Godzilla is once again a villain. And then after that, they have that god awful Netflix anime trilogy, which once again has Godzilla as his villain. Yeah, but so sorry, I don't know where I'm going with this. So the most recent Japanese movies, Godzilla is more villainous.
So,
What I'm
so
trying
it
to say
sounds
is that
like there's not a consistent through line of what is,
what his
of
moral alignment
thematic,
is.
of moral or thematic attachments.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's various. It could vary between movie to movie because different people are creating it.
Do alone, and they will solve all your problems, including global warming. And listen, I loved King of the Monsters. I love spectacle fighting, but this character drift can have very weird, not very good consequences. I mean, the remakes take Godzilla, a character that was an embodiment of the terror of nuclear devastation, and without removing any of his nuclear power or radioactivity, makes his strongest advocate a middle-aged Japanese man who was personally affected by the very event Godzilla represents.
No, his father was. Yeah, his father witnessed the bombings. That character is way too young to have been around for that.
True. Also, is this not, a sign of moving on, growing, forgetting the past, sort of forgetting the horrors of the past or learning from them and saying, look, we need to come together and discuss what we're going to do about this and how we're going to solve this problem rather than throwing a bomb at it. Because that's sort of like the theme of the original doesn't track with the new one because we're what, 7 decades on at this point? 6 or 7? So that's a lot of time to have passed. And it would make sense that his father would, not advocate on behalf of Godzilla. But having seen the devastation that at Hiroshima that happened in Hiroshima, his father, this, and his father talking about it, it makes sense that this man would have a completely different attitude about it. You're like, this is an event that happened in the past. It was horrific. But now I'm advocating on behalf of these things because it's necessary, because
Yeah.
the alternative is worse.
Well, the guy is defensive of Godzilla, but if I remember correctly, he doesn't like using nuclear weapons as a solution. So the military's plan in the 2014 movie to get rid of the Mutos.
So he's literally he's his defense of Godzilla is advocating for let's not blow it up with a nuke because a nuke was what got us into this situation in the first place.
Mm-hmm. More or less.
How is that wrong? Like, it would make sense for him as, a child of someone who witnessed this event in history to stand up and say, my father told me about this shit. It was horrifying. We should probably consider other options rather than throwing the nuke at it.
Yeah. Not to mention, there's also kind of leaving out context because Sarazawa's character in the movie, he's part of this organization called Monarch. Their entire job is to study the Titans. They don't see the Titans as monsters that need to be destroyed. They're creatures that need to be respected.
So they're animal rights group basically.
Yeah.
They're like, these things, we need to study them and we need to give them respect because they'll destroy us. Let's not have, let's not throw the nuclear option just yet. So
The character of Serizawa exists in the remakes to metatextually remind the audience of Godzilla's Japanese roots, and
Okay, and
very specifically his connection to the bombing. This is cute, I think. It's fan service right up until Serizawa dies by manually detonating a nuke to revive Godzilla. And this
yeah, that's it. That was weird.
is
But I
treated
mean-
as catharsis for his character because the nukes he hates and fears were used for good, but the good it did is reviving a giant monster who originally represented the very thing that scarred this character in the first place.
No, in this continuity, Godzilla is the more or less the hero. He sees God. He doesn't fear or despise Godzilla. He's a creature that he strongly respects. He's sacrificing himself so he can revive Godzilla. Because Ghidorah at the time, Ghidorah is trying to destroy and recreate the world in his image.
But this makes, sense for the character. It makes sense that this character is on this arc from what we've seen. His father witnessed the bombings. He heard about them. He advocates against the use of nuclear weapons. And then proceeds to understand, okay, we have reached a point where nuclear weapons are literally our only option for humanity and the rest of the world. Coming to the sort of realization that, oh, yeah, this is necessary. This is what needs to be done. And even though I disagree with the use of them, this is what needs to be done.
Like, yeah,
That's
it is kind
good
of
character writing and
yeah. Oh,
connects
sorry, go
to
on.
the original.
Like, yeah, I can see where Red's coming from, where it does seem kind of weird from a very weird from a meta perspective, but it actually makes sense within the context of the show of the movie.
I would say it makes sense. I would say it's a very nice nod. I would say from a meta perspective, it's a very good connection to its origins, to the first, which is about the consequences and the devastation of the use of nukes, and how w- you know 30 year for like you know several decades down the line, a child of one of the witnesses of that event in history is now advocating that, yeah, we should, this thing is a consequence of our playing around with nuclear weapons. We need to sort of respect it. And then he ends up real, and then at the end it's like, oh, the only way, we have reached a point where there is no other option but to do this. Sort of we have sort of, yeah, we should not, our first instinct should not be to throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing, but at a point, using the nuclear option is the only option.
But he doesn't represent that in this movie, but Serizawa's character is meant to remind us of a time when he did. So is this cool? Is this weirdly manipulative? What is this? Is this America taking a Japanese anti-nuclear weapons narrative and twisting it to be completely pro-nuclear weapons to forgive themselves for what they've done? What is
No.
Okay, so yeah, it's acknowledging Godzilla's nuclear roots from from the real world perspective, but yeah, it's just doing its own thing. It's not trying to be allegorical.
Yeah. This would be one of those scenarios where you're reading too much into it comes into play.
Okay, and not to mention, like, there have been cases where people try, like, in one Godzilla movie, this is from the Heisei era, the Godzilla, the heroes, or I guess the military essentially does try to power Godzilla up with a nuclear submarine. So like they're trying to. So long story short, they think Godzilla got erased from history due to time travel shenanigans. So they send a nuclear submarine to go find the dinosaur that would be Godzilla, and just radiate him with a nuclear submarine to recreate Godzilla. But then it turns out Godzilla still exists anyway, so he just grabs a submarine and just blows it up and absorbs it and becomes huge.
Interesting.
Yeah, the movie doesn't make any fucking sense.
what's happening here? The allegory's all twisted up on itself, and while
The point
Yeah.
I'm trying to make is that, yeah, the Japanese themselves also do a bunch of crazy shit with Godzilla. This isn't exclusively. It's a problem I see with a lot of people on the internet. They seem to have some kind of weird innate bias against Americans handling Japanese property. It's like this, like they seem like they. It's like this.
Like the people that don't like Power Rangers but like Super Sentai and
Yeah,
advocate that Super Sentai is a
it's like-
1,000 times better.
Yeah, it's like they instinctively believe that Americans can't handle Japanese property well or respectfully.
Which,
That because there are bad English dubs and just bad localization, that means the entire system is fucked because of a few cherry picked examples.
mhm. Though if we were to take more recent series of Power Rangers into account, I cannot say I disagree with them. Oh, Disney era Power Rangers is the best Power Rangers. I will hear no argument against it. Like, all of Disney Power Rangers were bangers.
Even Operation Overdrive.
Look, Operation Overdrive is a mess, but it's a better mess than anything Nickelodeon has produced.
I like Dino Charge. Thought that was pretty good.
Pointing out the one exception to the rule does not make the rule not exist.
Well, you're saying that Operation Overdrive is better than anything Nickelodeon did.
I'm saying that the dumbest kid in the class can still outsmart the dumbest kid in another class. Basically, the worst kid. Basically, Operation Overdrive is is part 1 Naruto of Power Rangers versus, you have Dino Charge, which is like Boruto of the Naruto is like the Boruto. Inferior in just about every way, but still, good. Except recently. But moving on.
Themselves for what they've done? What is happening here? The allegory's all twisted up on itself, and while it's a beautifully done scene, the more you think about it, the weirder it gets.
Actually,
mean,
no. I
but
think
once
the scene
again,
makes sense within the context of at least
Yeah.
within the context that Red has presented me. This scene makes sense.
I mean, yeah. I mean, who said the allegory is what you think it is? Okay, I think we've beaten this
No.
horse enough.
Legacy, you're lying to me. You're lying to me because I like Virgil too much.
Oh yeah, and Adam's actor plays Nero.
Oh my god, it is the oh my god, that's awesome. I like it when people that have been in Power Rangers show up in my life other places. It's nice. It's like a surprise.
Yep, and yeah, Adam's voice actor does a whole bunch of stuff in
Mhm.
anime.
You mean Johnny Young Bosch?
Yeah,
That's
Anyway, taking these
okay. So she says the allegory is all twisted up on itself, but if you look at him, within the context of his own movie, as he's presented, it makes sense. And if we look at it at the only way the allegory, quote unquote, gets twisted up on itself is if you assume that Godzilla has a continuous and unending narrative of anti-nukes, which is
would
not the case.
nope, purely case by case.
So the allegory doesn't twist itself. It's just it's within the context of the narrative of the film. This makes sense. Because it sounds like you'd have, in order to, it sounds like the Godzilla movies are so numerous that you can't take a group of them and produce a thematic through line.
terrifying giant monsters and making them benevolent is a very appealing way to answer the question of how would humanity handle this, because it changes the question right at the source. Well, these things, we don't need to handle them. They're not functionally unstoppable forces of malevolence, they're just misunderstood. And they don't kill innocent bystanders indiscriminately. At worst, it's an accident. And if there are monsters that are actively malevolent and kill people we like, there's always a good monster there to
Okay,
fight them.
hold on a sec. Are we going to bring up any other kaiju material besides Godzilla and King Kong? So what
don't
about
think so.
Pacific Rim? What about Ultraman?
Well,
What about Power Rangers / Super Sentai?
She was talking about I think she was brings up Pacific Rim because the link you sent me was towards the end of the video. Like it was autoplayed at towards the end of the video.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
whether that was my YouTube or yours, but like she does seem to talk about Pacific Rim. a little bit, but here I lost what I was going to say.
Godzilla isn't an embodiment of nuclear Armageddon.
She could talk about what I think. Fuck, what was it called? Hold on.
I like how she's equating the sort of more benevolent, things about the more benevolent Godzilla movies as, oh, these things aren't malevolent, or we don't have to do anything about this, and they don't kill innocent people maliciously. They do it by accident. I'm like, yeah, that's called being a force of nature.
Oh yeah, so
If we're going to argue for a continuous allegory of throughout all the Godzilla movies, it's absolutely that humanity does not have control, as much control as we think we do. Like
yeah,
that would be it. And that's not a hard allegory to impart upon from these movies.
yeah. So I'm hoping Red will talk about more kaiju movies before this is over. I wanted to talk about Pulgasari. This was a North Korean kaiju movie. So what happened was during the movie's production, an actual South Korean filmmaker and his wife were straight up kidnapped and brought to North Korea to direct the movie.
Horrifying,
Yeah, and so
but hilarious. It's like it. Okay, it's like the Emu War. It's sort of like horrifying on the face of it, but then you realize, oh, they kidnapped him to make a movie. That's kind of funny.
yeah, the movie itself takes place during takes place in Korea back during I think like a more like a medieval kind of era. And ironically, Pulgasari is about a monster to destroy or fighting an authoritarian regime. Typical communist tactic to say that your enemies are the authoritarians and we are of no sin.
True.
He's our friend. And also maybe nukes are a good thing. Godzilla likes us.
That's not what he's saying. That's not what that scene is saying. The story of that scene is this man is we are in our darkest hour and we are desperately trying to save the one thing that might give us a chance, and the only way to save it is to do this. That's it. A noble sacrifice to save everyone.
Because we're the good guys. Because if there's one thing nuclear Armageddon is known for, it's discerning.
But that's not the allegory within that film.
It seems like Red just has this innate America bad mentality. That's what I'm getting. That's what I'm getting from this video.
Yeah.
America bad, everyone else good.
And like I would point out that within the you've taken one movie, which you are correct about, in that Godzilla 1954 is a political allegory for the destruction of the dropping of the nukes and the continued nuclear testing. But you can't apply that same allegory to the 2014 film because the 2014 film is made in an entirely different context. So it doesn't have the same political motivations behind it, nor does it have the same thematic through lines. You would have to, in order for you to connect these two films in their thematic through line, you would have to go through each incarnation of Godzilla through all the years and be like, oh, here's where Godzilla has consistently been an allegory for the destruction of nuclear war or the destruction of nukes. But that's not the case. So you've taken one solid example and are now attempting to tether, to lasso another one and tie them together as if they have some sort of thematic connection when they obviously don't.
Judgment. And honestly, I think that's a big part of why those recent movies fell a little flat. They've got all the flair and much better graphics, but none of the weight.
You think
These
I actually
kaiju-
give a shit what the critic score is?
Yeah.
They're fucking contrarians. I don't care what they think.
Nobody cares what the critics think anymore. Everybody knows they're either bought and paid for, or they're shills,
That is what a shill is, bought and paid for.
I suppose.
They're either shills or just contrarians.
Yeah.
They have absolute shit taste in movies, but they're so confident in their shit taste.
And at
And
83% on something that came out on a monster movie, I mean, yeah, like it you're not there for the plot. It's a B movie.
yeah,
You
when it
go there to watch monsters fight.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a thing that bugs me about like these types of people. That basically, I'm willing to play devil's advocate and say that Red is not actually a Godzilla fan. At best, she's casual at best. That's the thing that's a thing you can see is where people will sing the original movie to high heaven, but they tiptoe around the rest of the French. They'll sing the original movie to high heaven, but then they'll shit all over the recent movies and just kind of tiptoe around everything in between.
Hi, Chip. Yeah, no, I wouldn't argue that critics are unimportant because, criticizing something is how we make things better. My issue with mainstream critics nowadays is that they're bought for access, basically. They'll happily give a shit movie a middling review, so it makes money, so they get more access.
kaiju don't mean anything. Instead of embodying some primal
How
terror that'll
would
resonate
cinema not exist without critics?
uncomfortably well with the audience,
I don't
they're
know,
just
man.
saying, "Hey guys, wouldn't it be rad?"
Listening to the critic score sounds pretty sheepish, if you ask me.
Got all the flair and much better graphics, but none of the weight. These kaiju
What do you mean wait? Beyond the first movie, it sounds like a lot of them were just B-movie romps with monster battles in them. Like, I don't understand where you're getting this idea that everything has to be so weighty. Everything must have meaning. Why, Red, why are you saying that every movie has to be art house cinema?
kaiju don't mean anything. Instead of embodying some primal terror that'll resonate uncomfortably well with the audience, they're just saying, "Hey guys, wouldn't it be rad if a giant monster came and fixed global warming for us?" And yes,
I mean, I wouldn't say they do that. But, the people that generally advocate and say like, "Oh, what if we just start planting things in the Sahara Desert and make it a forest and da 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 da." I'm like, you really don't understand how the planet works, do you?
that would be rad. But it's very unlikely. But one man dared to stand against the tide of meaningless, empty spectacle, to raise a fist skyward in solitary defiance and say, if humanity were faced with an onslaught of malevolent, unstoppable giant monsters, humanity would make giant robots to punch those giant monsters in the face.
Okay, this is a combination of like Japan's two favorite things.
Yeah, so we're finally talking about Pacific Rim.
Yes. Like I've never seen Pacific Rim, but I can tell you this is just a combination of like Japan's two favorite things.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't think there's meant to be much thought into it. It's just, hey, it's Godzilla versus Evangelion.
So let's talk about Pacific Rim. Guillermo del Toro is a man who understands monsters. He understands the complex interplay between humanity and inhumanity, and he knows that sometimes a person is a monster, sometimes a monster is a person, and sometimes a monster is a monster. You got Hellboy in The Shape of Water, and
The less said about The Shape of Water, the better.
Blade 2, apparently, where he explores inhuman, monstrous protagonists that are fundamentally people on the inside. Emotional, compassionate, lonely. I haven't watched Blade 2. The point is, sometimes his monsters are people, and sometimes they're monsters. And when they're monsters, they're usually allegorical. Del Toro went on record stating that the Pale Man, a child-eating antagonist in Pan's Labyrinth, represents institutional evil feeding on the helpless, and outright says it's no coincidence that it's a pale man. Bold. So when Del Toro took a break from directing
Cringe.
horror to make a badass action giant robots versus giant monsters punch up, he did what he does best. He made the monsters mean something. The protagonist Raleigh at one point describes being in a Jaeger as being powerful enough to fight a hurricane and win. That humans face down colossal, mind-numbingly destructive threats and respond by making themselves big and strong enough to fight it hand to hand. It's a very uplifting message about human nature, the power of teamwork, and how nothing is strong enough to keep us down if we decide to fight back. Pacific Rim is a movie about humans being human. So the monsters are monsters. More specifically, they're hurricanes. It's no coincidence they're given cute nicknames and ranked with a category system from 1 to 5. And specifically, in-universe, they're part of a hostile terraforming effort from an extra-dimensional race of colonizing aliens. The kaiju in Pacific Rim are, in the most literal sense, climate change, and that they are
I thought you were gonna say they're an allegory for colonialism. You just said they were created by colonizing aliens.
Yeah, literally. Like, literally, this is colonialism. That's funny. I have to consider what Chip just said. By the way, welcome to the stream, Chip.
You sure about that? I don't know, man. I think cinema would still exist regardless.
I'd need to review my film history to give like a thought out response to that. My knee-jerk response is to say you're wrong, but my sort of intellectual response is to say, I can see where that would be something that people could conclude. Let us see if I reach the same conclusion upon review.
are physically changing the climate, battering down coastal cities like hurricanes strengthened by warming waters, poisoning the oceans with chemical-spilled blood, overwhelming storm walls built in anticipation of much smaller threats. Hell, Charlie Day's character outright draws the comparison, suggesting that human-made climate change has already done most of the alien terraforming, and now they're just sending in the kaiju for the finishing touch. Essentially, humans accelerated the process of the aliens changing the climate. Do you get it? Okay. Pacific Rim very specifically harkens back to Godzilla's origins as a global existential threat personified, raising the stakes by making the threat lots of kaiju instead of just one.
Okay, so we can now connect these two films because I can see where she concludes that. I would argue it's more colonial than, more colonization versus, climate change. But, we can connect the two at the very least. You cannot connect the 2014 Godzilla movie to the older one.
And makes the danger they represent immediate and extremely relevant. It sends the message that yes, we made this happen, and yes, things are very bad and getting worse. But it also says that yes, we can fight back. If we put aside our differences, ignore all our useless political squabbling, focus on the only thing that really matters, and then confront the apocalypse head on, we will be able to punch it into submission. And also drop a nuke on it. Kaiju movies can never agree if nukes are good or bad.
They don't have to. It's case by case. This isn't Godzilla. The original Godzilla said that nukes are bad. That doesn't mean every other kaiju franchise in existence has to follow that.
So this is, I'm guessing, her final sort of points. Kaiju movies often tell allegorical tales of real-world issues and are thus often very political. I think we've, gone through enough of the other movies, mention them at the very least, to disprove that. She is, yeah, without seeing it, I can't say one way or the other on Pacific Rim. But from the context she provided, it sounds to me more like colonization rather than climate change. But it's very clear the 1954 Godzilla was meant to be very political, was meant to be a criticism or a allegory for the nuclear bombs and the tragedy thereof. However, I cannot say, because she didn't provide much more, to that any of the other Godzilla movies are the same. And thus, this sort of conclusion is a very hard sell for me. And it seems like she's reaching just a little.
Anyway, the point is, kaiju movies frequently make statements about the world, the things that scare us, and what we can do about them, and as a result are often extremely political when you look at them. Sometimes they say we can't do anything about them. Sometimes they say
Or at least with the 3 examples you gave.
Yeah.
problems are our fault.
You're not
Sometimes
gonna
they bounce back to
You're not
wish.
going to mention Ultraman, Power Rangers, or anything like that.
Like, literally. Because those kaiju battles, quote unquote. See, this is what I was saying at the beginning of the video. Oh, like you want to put the fence around this, because if we don't, we have plenty of other examples like Gundam, Power Rangers, Ultraman. I think even Beetleborgs has giant creature battles.
Gundam is exclusively mecha.
But if we're going to this is why you have to put the definition, you have to define what a kaiju movie is. So at the very beginning of the video, what she should have done is define what a kaiju movie is. Because then we can work within that definition, and then you and I couldn't bring up things like Power Rangers and Ultraman in response to this, because they don't fit the definition we're working with. And I would be perfectly happy to work within a definition she provided, but she doesn't provide one. She only provides a general genre theme, a general genre description, which, if I were, uncharitable, could crowbar many things into. But obviously, general kaiju battles are, like, we could throw in Pokemon. There is a literal kaiju battle in Pokemon. It happens. It happens in one of the early seasons. But now you've reached the end of your video, and your conclusion is dependent on that nebulous definition. And so I can come in with counterexamples aplenty, showing you, like, this is not a theme that is consistent throughout, and these are not themes that are consistent throughout. Not this movie, and this movie show that this is wrong. Power Rangers shows, like, kaijus, like, yeah, there's a kaiju battle in Power Rangers, but the good guys win because, peace and justice and all that. There's no greater thematic consistency there.
Fulfillment and imagine a world where the giant unstoppable force is a good thing that'll fix our giant unfixable problems. And sometimes they say it's up to us to work together and face the problem head on, to admit that things are bad and to fight to the very end to make them better again. And also, sometimes it's just fun to watch 2 incomprehensibly giant monsters kick the crap out of each other. Oh, hell yeah! So yeah.
Well, that was
Eh. Not very.
Yeah, spot on.
Very poignant, poor child.
Moving forward.
I
Yep,
feel
that
like that
sums
sums it up.
Yep. Just seems like you're just very cherry picked to support a specific narrative.
Yeah, it does feel that way. It feels like she ignored the sort of context and
Let's see. She pretty much cherry picked the Godzilla franchise, used the symbolism of the original movie, and just disregarded everything else.
yeah, she used
And,
the symbolism of the original movie, which is accurate.
and then also just completely used made up symbolism for King Kong.
Very true.
And as for Pacific Rim, well, I mean, I haven't seen the movie in a long time, so I don't really remember the climate change angle.
I mean, I guess you can see it with, the poisoning of the oceans, the destruction they bring by but I would point out that that's more a consequence of the actions of, the invaders rather than humanity's own actions. Like in order to stop the poisoning of the oceans due to monster blood and or the sort of destruction of cities and storm walls and all that, then humanity would have to just roll over and let these interdimensional invaders win. So it's hard to the climate change narrative in there. It seems like a reach, but I've never seen Pacific Rim. But that was everything. Caesar, you got anything else?
Nope.
All right. So in that case, thank you all so much for watching and coming and hanging out with us on a Sunday. Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out. Oh, and I will be back tomorrow with a continuing Pokemon Nuzlocke of Pokemon Black 2. So I'll be live at 2 p.m. Central Time if y'all want to come and hang out, or all the VODs are available after.
How many times have you died now?
I am on attempt 22.
Oof. Wait, 22. Did you? Wait, you died a lot. You died on Friday.
Yep.
Oh Christ, man.
Yeah. A Mantine. And in the 8th gym, a Mantine, the Gothitelle I brought did not, was unable to hit a charge beam.
Mm.
I
Well,
should have I
well,
should have done other things for it, but charge beam was super effective. I hit the super effective button. It didn't work.
well, your persistence is admirable.
Gotta keep going. All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Y'all have a wonderful day.